The headquarters of Sterling Dynamics, a leading international tech company, thrummed with the rhythm of innovation. Nestled in the heart of downtown Chicago, it was a place of polished glass, fast-talking executives, and ceaseless ambition. Everyone was in a hurry, everyone had a title, and no one noticed the janitor, at least not until that Tuesday. His name was Mr. Mateo Alvarez, a quiet man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and an ever-present blue janitor's uniform. He walked with a slight limp and always carried a folded-up paperback in his back pocket. No one ever looked close enough to see it was a Latin dictionary. Mateo had worked at Sterling Dynamics for 6 years. To most of the staff, he was just the janitor, the man who mopped the floors, emptied trash bins, and quietly disappeared before 9 a.m. But that morning, something happened, something that would ripple through the company like a shock wave. It began innocently enough. The company had visitors from Berlin, and the receptionist, Julia, was struggling to communicate. The guests looked increasingly confused, and the translator app kept spitting out nonsense. Mateo had just finished polishing the floor when he noticed the commotion. Entschuldigung, he said softly, approaching with a respectful nod. Julia turned, startled. The German visitors looked up, their faces lighting up in surprise. Sie sprechen Deutsch? One of them asked. Mateo smiled, modestly. Fließend. Ich habe in München gelebt. He chatted with them for several minutes, flawlessly, fluently, with the ease of a native. A few feet away, CEO Landon Cray, who had just stepped off the elevator, stopped mid-stride. He didn't say anything, just watched. Later that day, it happened again. This time, it was the French team from Paris HQ who arrived early for a video conference. The assistant scheduled to host them was late, and again, confusion reigned. Mateo, vacuuming the hallway outside the meeting room, gently stepped in. Bonjour, messieurs. Vous attendez pour la conférence? Vous parlez français? One of them asked, wide-eyed. Mais bien sûr, Mateo replied, adjusting his glasses. This time, Landon was watching from the security feed. His assistant, Chloe, entered his office an hour later. Sir, there's something you need to see, she said, breathless. He was already leaning over his desk, fast-forwarding footage from the cameras. Mateo Alvarez, Landon murmured, tapping his finger on the paused frame where the janitor was shaking hands with the French rep. He's not just a janitor, Chloe hesitated. You think he's overqualified? I think he's a damn genius, Landon said. The next morning, Landon made an unannounced trip to the janitor's supply closet in the basement. Mateo turned, slightly startled, mop in hand. Mr. Cray? He asked. Did someone complain? Landon shook his head. Quite the opposite. I want to talk to you. But not here. Mateo blinked, confused. I am taking you to lunch, Landon said firmly. You're riding shotgun with me to the executive lounge. People turned their heads as the janitor walked beside the CEO, straight into the elevator. It wasn't until they were seated that Landon asked the question that had been burning in his mind. How many languages do you speak, Mateo? Mateo looked down, humble as ever. Fluently? 9. I can get by in 4 more. Landon leaned back, stunned. You have any degrees? 2, Mateo admitted. Linguistics and anthropology. I taught at a university in Colombia before I came here. Silence hung between them. Why a janitor? Landon finally asked. Mateo's answer was soft but powerful. I lost everything during the conflict back home. My credentials didn't transfer. I had a son to support. I needed work, any work, so I cleaned floors. Landon Cray, for once in his corporate life, didn't know what to say. But he would. Soon. And what he'd do next would send shockwaves through the entire building. Word traveled fast. By lunchtime the next day, everyone on the 19th floor was whispering about what they saw. The janitor, eating grilled salmon across from Landon Cray, the elusive billionaire CEO who usually dined alone or with board members. Is he in trouble? Someone whispered. No, another said. He saved the French deal yesterday. But no one really knew. The office buzzed with curiosity, but Mateo returned to his work as usual, mop in hand, head slightly bowed, like always. But something had changed in the air around him. People made eye contact now. Some even said hello. Meanwhile, Landon sat in his office, turning over Mateo's story in his mind like a puzzle piece that didn't fit the world he'd built. He had Chloe pull Mateo's personnel file, just 2 pages, no resume, just an application form filled out in neat handwriting, listing only a few previous cleaning jobs, no mention of Colombia, no degrees, no languages. Landon looked out the window, troubled. Why would someone hide something like that? That night, Landon drove to the South Side himself, not his driver, not his Tesla. He wanted to see it. Mateo's neighborhood was modest, rows of aging apartments, cracked sidewalks, and kids playing barefoot in the parking lot. He found Mateo helping a boy fix a rusted bike chain near a sagging fence. "Mr. Cray?" Mateo asked, surprised. "Did I forget something?" "No. I just wanted to understand," Landon replied. Mateo looked at him for a long moment, then motioned for him to come inside. The apartment was small but spotless. On the bookshelf were Spanish novels, grammar workbooks, and dictionaries in nearly every major language: Russian, Mandarin, Arabic, Swahili. Photos lined the walls: a younger Mateo with his wife, a child smiling with missing teeth, a black and white picture of a classroom with students in uniforms. Landon stared. "You were a professor?" "Lecturer in Colombia. I taught comparative linguistics for 10 years. My wife was a translator. When she died in the crossfire during a protest, I fled with our son." He sat down quietly. "In the US, my degrees were rejected. I didn't have the money to recertify, so I cleaned floors because I had to." Landon didn't know what to say, but when he got into his car an hour later, he wasn't thinking like a CEO anymore. He was thinking like a human being. The next morning, the executive team received a surprise invite to a 10 a.m. meeting in the boardroom. Nobody knew what it was about. They filed in, confused, murmuring. And then the door opened. Mateo walked in, wearing a suit. Behind him was Landon. "Everyone," Landon began, standing at the head of the table. "This is Mr. Mateo Alvarez. Up until yesterday, you knew him as our janitor." People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "But Mr. Alvarez is also a polyglot, a former university lecturer, and a man who can speak fluently with 9 of our international clients without ever picking up a translator." He paused. "Starting today, he is the director of global communications strategy." Mouths dropped open. Chloe gasped audibly. Landon smiled. "Effective immediately, he'll help us build cultural bridges, train our staff, and improve our overseas relationships. And I think we all have something to learn from him." Applause began slowly, then erupted. Mateo stood there, stunned, lips trembling. "Thank you," he said softly. I never thought this would happen." Landon clapped him on the back. "It didn't happen, Mateo. You made it happen. You just needed someone to see." Mateo sat behind a real desk now. Not a mop closet, not a basement storeroom, but a sunlit corner office with a nameplate that read Mateo Alvarez, Director, Global Communications. He still wore his old janitor boots for the first few days. Habit, maybe. Humility, more likely. But slowly, the office adapted to him just as much as he adapted to it. Executives who once passed him by without a glance now stood in line for his insights. And the changes he brought? Immediate. And revolutionary. Mateo designed a multilingual onboarding system for new hires, making it accessible for international staff. He launched a company-wide cultural literacy initiative that taught employees about traditions, phrases, and customs from each of Sterling Dynamics' global branches. At the Tokyo office, executives stopped making accidental faux pas thanks to Mateo's etiquette guidelines. In Dubai, a near-failed deal was rescued when Mateo coached the sales team on Arabic honorifics and negotiation norms. In Brazil, he helped the engineering staff translate technical documents that had been lost in poor AI-generated translations. For the first time, the overseas teams felt seen and respected. Mateo even held lunchtime language circles, where interns and managers alike sat on the floor and practiced basic phrases in different languages: French, Swahili, Mandarin, Hindi. Every week, a new language, a new culture, a new bridge. But it wasn't just the company that changed. It was Landon Cray, too. One afternoon, he invited Mateo to his penthouse office overlooking Lake Michigan. "Do you know why your story matters so much to me?" Landon asked. Mateo shook his head. "When I started this company, I wanted to build something that connected people, but I got lost in numbers, markets, ego. You reminded me what connection actually means." He stood, walking to the window. "I almost missed you, a man with more knowledge than most of my board, and I almost missed you because you were holding a mop." Mateo smiled. "That mop fed my son. It got me here." Landon turned. "I want to fund your dream, Mateo, whatever it is. Build a program. Start a school. I'll back it." Fully. Mateo's eyes misted. "I've always wanted to start a community center," he said slowly. "For immigrants, people like me. A place to learn language, culture, and hope." Landon nodded. "Then let's build it." 1 year later, on a rainy spring morning, a sleek building opened on the south side of Chicago. Its sign read, "The Alvarez Center for Language and Integration." Inside, dozens of families sat in classrooms learning English, job interview skills, and computer basics. Volunteers from Sterling Dynamics taught classes. So did Mateo, still wearing his boots. Local news ran the headline, "From janitor to director, the man who spoke 9 languages and changed 9,000 lives." At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Mateo stood before a crowd of students, staff, and friends. His son, now a high school senior, held the scissors beside him. Reporters gathered, cameras clicked, and when they asked Mateo what he wanted the world to remember, he said only this: "Look beyond the uniform. Behind every silent man is a story, a skill, a voice the world almost missed." The crowd applauded, but Landon didn't clap right away. He simply looked at the man he nearly overlooked and felt deeply thankful, because sometimes greatness doesn't walk in wearing a suit. Sometimes it carries a mop and speaks 9 languages.